twins.
Government of twins. Yeah, I like them too.
What?
I like government of twins.
Twinny?
Or giveaway. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I like them.
Are they warm or just dress up?
Just dress socks. Just cheap dress socks.
Think we're good?
Good evening. I'm calling the Monday, September 13th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting to order. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. All right. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda this evening. Do I have any requests for changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda for Monday, September 13th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting.
All right, a motion from Commissioner DeSantis. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Higgins. All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, agenda is approved. Moving on, we have the minutes from the meeting held Monday, August 9th, 2021. Any requests for changes or concerns? Commissioner Kirk?
Mr. Chairman, if you go to page 4 of the minutes, that first major paragraph, first line, Kirk stated that sometimes development is perceived less than ideal instead of idea. But this project, so change ideal to ideal, and then after but, say, but this project. That was the intent of what I said.
Thank you. Commissioner Farr?
Mr. Chair, same page, same John Chenred's topic at the very, very top of that same page 4. That's a continuation of the paragraph from page 3, where I was having some banter with Mr. Rue about the different types of retaining walls. The last sentence, which is at the top of page 4, says Keystone modular block was preferred and big blocks were the most reliable. I thought that might use some wordsmithing there just to get the points across better. I did call Julie on that point, and I think she was going to look at some language for me to recommend.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, after talking with Commissioner Farr, I reviewed the tape, or that sounds old. I reviewed the video, and I would recommend that the last sentence be rewritten to read, Keystone modular block are allowed and big block were preferred. That is a more accurate representation of what was said at the meeting.
Thank you. That's agreeable to me, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So do I have a motion for the minutes twice amended?
So moved.
All right, Commissioner Kirk motioned to amend the minutes. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Commissioner Farr. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Moving on, we have one public hearing tonight. This is a variance Alina Health Road. I'm sorry, variance Alina Health, BOA 2021-03, location 775 Prairie Center Drive. Request for a wall sign area of 150.7 square feet. City code maximum is 50 square feet. Cumulative building wall sign area of 200.7 square feet. City code maximum is 50 square feet. Will the proponent of the project please come forward and... Good evening. If you could state your name and spell for record and tell us about your project, please.
Yes, my name's Andrea Berg, and my first name, A-N-D-R-E-A, and last name is B-E-R-G.
Thank you.
And address is Abbott Northwestern Hospital, 800 East 28th Street, Minneapolis, Minnesota, 55407. All right, and thank you, Chair and Commission, for having us here today. I do have a PowerPoint that I'd like to present. Okay.
Is it not working?
Let's see. Thank you.
I think.
Okay. So the first slide is introducing who we are. We're a line of health system. We're a not-for-profit system in Minnesota and western Wisconsin. We have close to 30,000 caregivers. We have 11 hospitals, 3 of which include Abbott Northwestern Hospital, United Hospital, Mercy Hospital in the Metro. We have over 90 clinics. We have many rehabilitation locations, 52, 15 retail pharmacy sites, 2 ambulatory care centers, and we have specialty medical services, including hospice care and emergency medical service. Next slide, please. So why we're here today is it's a passion project for Allina Health. We've been very interested in bringing care to the community of Eden Prairie, and we've really taken our time to figure out what kind of care is the right care in Eden Prairie and how could we bring a different model to Eden Prairie. And so what we've found then, and what this clinic, the Allina Health Clinic, will allow us to do is to deliver patient-centered, digitally supported, and integrated care to the community of Eden Prairie. And what this means is that we're going to be trying a lot of different novel concepts in this clinic, including app-based technologies. And by using app-based technologies, our goal is to improve the patient experience. We're also going to have small group education sessions, voice-enabled AI technology that helps with clinic documentation, micro teleconsults. So if a patient comes to see a general cardiologist and we know that that patient then has to go to a subspecialist, instead of referring the patient to that subspecialist, which would take weeks, they can see that subspecialist in a micro consult that same day. And then we're also going to use analytics in this clinic to really try and manage the cost of care for the patient. All of this then, when we were assessing what kind of care does this community need, we took a look at Eden Prairie, and it was evident to us that down the road there's going to be a shortage of cardiology and internal medicine in this community, which is why then we are partnering closely with ANGMA, Abbott Northwestern General Medical Associates, and also Minneapolis Heart Institute, so cardiology and internal medicine. We've identified a clinic location, flagship corporate center, and that is on Prairie Center Drive. We've started construction this summer, and our goal is to have our first day of clinic on January 11th of 2022. And services in this clinic will be a whole host of primary care services, internal medicine. We're going to have general cardiology and prevention, and cardiology subspecialties, including electrophysiology, advanced heart failure, valve and structural heart, vascular medicine, and then advanced diagnostics. And we're also going to have a lab in this clinic. The space is about 22,000 square feet, so it's a very sizable clinic. 20 exam rooms. We're going to have telehealth room, pacemaker room, vascular procedure and ultrasound room, stress testing, echo, ultrasound, and we'll also have a CT scanner in this clinic space. So why we're here today then is that we're requesting a variance, and this actually is 2 requests to the variance. The first one is that the proposed variance requests 150 square foot wall sign. The city code maximum is 50 square feet. And then the second part of this then is the proposed variance requests a 200 square foot of cumulative building signage, whereas the city code is the maximum of 50 square feet. So we're requesting an additional sign on the face of the building, and that this sign is slightly larger. And the reason why we are requesting this is that cardiology tends to draw in an older population. We believe that having signage, not only for that, but also everyone, is very helpful in identifying the clinic. In addition to that, we have other health systems on the same street that have Health Partners signage and Health Fairview signage. With all of that, then, it seems to align with the characteristics of the neighborhood. And then in addition to that, very early on, as we were partnering with our landlord, he showed us that he is very supportive of this request. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any initial questions for Ms. Berg? Yeah, Commissioner Mitty.
Do you know approximately what percentage of the building you as a tenant take up compared to the overall building there?
Oh boy, I do know that. I have a colleague here, Nate went to Hippolyte. 1/8 of the building?
1/8.
1/8.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Ms. Berg.
Thank you.
Julie, would you take us through a planner's report, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the request before you this evening, as Ms. Berg stated, is a two-part request. One, to increase the individual wall sign area and also to increase the cumulative wall sign area to accommodate the proposed sign and the existing 50 square foot wall sign that is on the property currently. The property is zoned office. It is guided office in the 2040 comprehensive plan, so the zoning and guiding are consistent with one another. When the commission is reviewing requests for variances, there are several criteria that must be met. As a part of that analysis, staff has done that review and included that information in your staff report, so I'm just going to hit a few highlights of that analysis. First, one of the criteria is that the variance is in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance. Staff does find that criteria to be met. Also, unique circumstances. In this particular case, this office zoned property is quite distant from Prairie Center Drive. Most office buildings tend to be much closer to the roadway, but because of the original PUD that was approved for this property, the intent was to have the parking along the frontage in order to screen the parking from Purgatory Creek and wetland areas, so that from the building is closest to those wetland areas. In addition, the building was built at 60 feet in height rather than the 30 feet in height allowed by code, which of course changes the size and scale and massing of the overall site. In addition, as we talked about I believe it was at our last meeting, when there was a different sign variance for the flagship building, we talked about the impact of the LRT piers that run along Prairie Center Drive and how that can impact the visual field for prospective customers of this particular site. In addition, one of the other criteria is talking about the alteration of the essential neighborhood character. There are other office zone properties along this corridor. However, those buildings are much smaller and are closer to the roadway. The commercial buildings that are in proximity to the flagship corporate center do have signage in sizes that is consistent with what is proposed with this request. So staff is recommending approval of the variance, subject to the information outlined in the staff report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Julie. Any questions for the city?
Julie, I have a question.
Commissioner DeSanctis.
In terms of, and perhaps maybe I should direct this to the individuals over here in the audience, but in terms of illumination, will this sign be illuminated throughout the night or just through business hours that correspond to nightfall?
If you wouldn't mind, come up to the podium, please.
Hello, my name is Nathan Wendt. I'm a facilities project manager with Alina. To answer your question, I believe it would be lit through the night for visibility of the building, or if the city prefers that we don't, we can set it on timers and turn it off at certain times of the evening too.
That answers it.
Thank you. Any questions for the city? Commissioner Mitty.
Julie, there's references here about how the signage allowance for office is a lot smaller than, I guess, what is allowed for retail or commercial. Do you know offhand what the commercial maximum sign area is? Is it a calculation of linear feet of the building and/or overall facade?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Meddy, yes, all of the above. So in the instance where you have multiple frontages, the allowable signage is based on the size of the wall. However, there is a max to that. There's a cap of 300 square feet. So in this case, for conversation's sake, if this property were zoned commercial, it would be allowed a wall sign total of 300 square feet.
Other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Commissioner Farr.
Julie, can I ask you maybe to distinguish the finer points of the applicant being the tenant versus the building owner and landlord, and how this affects the accrued rights, benefits, or limitations of the owner in the future to tell tenants to come in for a sign variance on the building?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, as I understand this proposal, Alina would be one of several tenants within the flagship corporate center. As you know from your meeting 2 weeks ago, actually 4 weeks ago, sorry about that, 4 weeks ago, there was a variance request for the monument sign that is out on Prairie Center Drive, and from memory, I believe there were maybe 6 or 8 spots for the other tenant identification. So if this variance were to be approved, obviously Alina would utilize that variance, and the variance remains in effect for the life of the property. If the tenant changes hands, they would be able to continue with that increased sign size. This variance is not issued just to this specific tenant. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. Well, let me get more pointed with it then. So it sounds like if the Alina name were to change for some other reason to Medical Group A, then they could change the text on their sign as long as it fit within the square footage that we're allocating to them. If the landlord was presented with another full floor user that loved the Alina sign and said, boy, I'd like to have a sign that big as well, and if the landlord said, knock yourself out, go to the city and see what you can get. Are we putting a limitation tonight on opportunities for other tenants to come seek variances, further variances, and where does the building owner step in and say, I have a overall signage master plan that I'm going to live within?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so to answer the first part of Commissioner Farr's question, yes, if Alina adopted a new name in the future, they'd be able to swap out the text from Alina to whatever the new name of that user was, so long as it fell within the square footage theoretically approved this evening. If another tenant wanted to come forward and said, hey, I really like Alina's sign size, I would like that much too, and the landlord was supportive of that, to Commissioner Farr's point, they would then come to the city and talk with staff about, what that looks like, what that means for the property, and could pursue this same process. As a part of any variance that is being requested this evening, staff is not proposing, nor did the landlord or owner propose any overall limitations to the sign. So it reviewed on a case-by-case basis, if you will.
Okay, so then the final point then, after we discussed all that, is that because the applicant is the tenant, do we as a planning commission, or ultimately does the city council have the authority to encumber this request against owner to say, this is it? this is the most signage we're going to allow on the building. The applicant doesn't have control over that, you're telling me, and yet this commission may want to discuss that fact of whether or not we want to entertain future requests.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, certainly the planning commission can have whatever conversation it deems appropriate. That is within your purview. From a professional perspective, I have not seen that done in previous sign requests. Typically, how that would be handled would be through an overall PUD sign plan for the entire building. That would be a conversation that would be appropriate with the owner or the landlord of this property in the instance where multiple requests like this were coming in. You know, as you might imagine, staff fields many inquiries on signs throughout our workday or throughout the year. Very few of those end up as variance requests in front of the commission. Staff continues to work with property owners, tenants to address signage needs, find other solutions to the issues that they might have in the instance where the variance is very logical. There are unique reasons. Those criteria become very obvious through the request. Those are the types of requests that actually usually move forward to the commission for their review. I can say in the time that I've worked for the city, yes, we've had 2 variances in 2 meetings on this particular property, but the inquiries on this property are very few and far between.
Thanks, Julie.
Any questions? Commissioner Sanctus?
I just wanted to piggyback on Commissioner Farr's point about the possibility of setting a precedent and what happens if other entities within that building decide they want signage. There's at least a dermatology clinic and a diagnostic imaging clinic, which I believe are not affiliated with Alina directly. And the question becomes, there's a finite amount of space on the facade in the front. What would happen if the cat was let out of the bag, as it were, and other entities, medical entities, decided to also want to display their location via signage? So I think that's an excellent consideration. And so the idea of a master plan or coming up with, by approving this, we would be setting a precedent, and then the question becomes how much surface area would there be, and then what would happen, what would be the visual or aesthetic impact of multiple medical clinics deciding, well, we want to advertise ourselves too.
Other questions for the city? Or go to the hearing and then we can have continued discussion? Correct? Okay. This is a public hearing. If anyone would like to come forward and speak for or against this project, please do so now. I'm not seeing anyone. I'd entertain a motion to close. Oh, yeah, sure. Come on. You can state your name for the record,
Sure.
please.
Brianna Nord Parrish. I'm also with Alina Health, but I'm also a long-term, lifelong Eden Prairie resident. And I guess I just want to stand here and speak in support of the project. I think having Alina Health on the building aligns with the neighborhood and is important for access to this clinic. It'll improve accessibility. It'll improve the ability to locate this clinic. There's M Health Fairview across the street. It is a pharmacy and a primary care clinic. They do not have pharmacy or primary care on their sign that's visible from the road. Additionally, Health Partners has a clinic on Flying Cloud Drive, and their sign says Health Partners on 2 sides of the building that's visible from Flying Cloud Drive. So I think not allowing Alina Health to be on the outside of the clinic is really a disservice to the residents of Eden Prairie. And I agree, it does set a precedence, but I think this is a very unique circumstance. And I think just it will cause a lot of confusion and not be the most consumer-friendly, resident-friendly, patient-friendly signage. I think we can do better for my parents. I think we can do better for my grandparents that live in the area. So I would like to see them be able to identify their care provider easily. So thanks.
Great, thank you. And by way of process, once we close the public hearing, we might still have questions for you as well. So, with that, I entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
All right, motion from Commissioner Higgins to close the hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Taylor. All those in favor of closing public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the public hearing's closed. Continue discussion. Commissioner Meddy.
Just taking on how we're talking about the idea of, a master signage plan. So basically, the landlord is it's a private matter between the landlord and its tenants, how much signage it lets each tenant have. If we approve this, we're essentially allowing the property to have this 200 square feet of total cumulative signage. Presumably, the landlord has told Alina, you can have the 150, If another tenant comes along, they have to come back, and we would have to go from 200 to 300, whatever it might be. So I think it's sort of, it's more of the landlord's predicament by allowing Alina to come in with, yes, another tenant might come to them and ask for bigger signage. First, they have to have the landlord say, okay, then they come to us. I do think we need to keep in mind, allowing this, if there's other tenants, like they're not, half the building. There's a lot of other tenants at the building and potentially other very major tenants that another request might come up of additional signage. To me, it's kind of helpful to understand the maximum sign area for a commercial building is 300 square feet. That's sort of the upper limit, no matter how big it gets. I assume if this building were calculated via the commercial way, that it would hit that 300 square foot mark. So I'm thinking, all right, we're at 200. In all fairness, while this is an office building, it is more of when you have the medical office, that's a bit more of a retail, service-oriented type use. So I think that it's fair that their signage is more on par with the commercial. So if I'm thinking about it as the whole building, technically, if it were called commercial, which is what it is, it could have 300 square feet. Up to the landlord on how much they want to let each tenant have. I do think that it would be better to have, a plan where, if you look at the building, you either have 2 equal size areas or 4 equal size areas, but I think that's not necessarily up to us to police. I think that's all I'll say about that.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Kirk.
I'd just like to build on what Commissioner Meddy said, and I agree with her completely. I think signage is, to some degree, the issue of the landlord or the owner. And I think we have a reasonable request in front of us, and I would be supportive of it. And I think as for setting a precedent, I think if other businesses want to increase their visibility and all, there's a process to do that, and it's us. And I think that's fine. I would be more than willing to invest time from my perspective as a planning commissioner on reviewing such requests if they come up. And I agree, there is a limit, and I think, again, Commissioner Meddy has spoken to a reasonable limit, which we are within on this. So I think this is, in my mind, a reasonable request. Now, I will admit a little bias in that I am a long-term patient of the Minneapolis Art Institute, and it's an outstanding clinic that we are lucky to get here in Eden Prairie. And I think bringing that level of world-class care into our community is a very good thing. And the signage, to me, particularly when you look at the pictures where the sign is shown on the building, are not unreasonable at all for the scope, as I think the planning staff has said, for the scope of the building. So I'm supportive of it.
Thanks, Commissioner Kirk. Other discussion? Concerns? Yep, Commissioner Gooding.
I will just go along with Commissioner Meddy and Mr. Kirk. I think the plan is very reasonable. I think for the scale of the building, it actually looks good in the illustrations we've seen. I don't see where we set a precedent. We vote on things for variances throughout the city, and they don't seem to carry from one to another in setting precedent. I do believe it's a very reasonable request, and we could what if it to death, but I think it's got my support.
Commissioner Gooding. Commissioner Farr?
Mr. Chair. Yep, I also echo a lot of their comments. I think the scale is proportional to the distance of the building setback, like the planner mentioned. So it looks very much, I think, in scale with its size, given the distance from the public way. And that's really the selling point for me on this. Everybody wants signage. We heard it 4 weeks ago, about just making sure people can see it along the roadway with the monument sign, and now from the building face itself. Signage is so important to our businesses in Eden Prairie and throughout. So in general, I support good signage wherever it's appropriate. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that fine point about how we're not pitting the tail on the donkey of the owner at this point in time. It's simply a tenant request, and while it may be natural for me at least to say, let's pin something on the owner to say, this is it, or maybe it's not, maybe there's one more sign or something like that. It sounds like this isn't the forum for that, because the tenant is the applicant. And it may be appropriate for maybe another tenant to have another sign sometime in the future, and I agree with Commissioner Kirk's comment that application can come forward. I don't think we're giving away any precedence here that's a slippery slope, because they always have to come back through Planning Commission for that. So I'm in support of the signage variances as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Farr. Other comments, questions?
I think
Commissioner DeSanctis.
in toto, I would lean toward favoring this project. Again, with Commissioner Kirk's comment about the reputation and value to the community of having a cardiology practice squarely in the commercial district in a very strategic area, easy access to the freeway. I'm also satisfied that the two existing multi-unit apartment complexes, the one behind Bachman's and the one that's behind the piers, partially hidden by the train piers, that would have negligible impact, in my opinion, on their visual aesthetics. So I think that in sum, I would be in favor of your project.
Thank you. Commissioner Tell?
Yes, I too am in favor of this and think it's realistic. The question came up about lighting at night. The color schemes that that are shown in the example, are those the color schemes of your branding for the sign? So even when it's lit up at night, it's not like it's real bright and just standing out there. The color scheme seems to be kind of cool and warming. So, that was one thing I wanted to bring back around, is the lighting at night, and that doesn't seem to be a big issue, in my opinion.
Commissioner Higgins.
I also concur with the other views that have been expressed by the commissioners here tonight, with one addition, and that only is that the experience that I think we can expect to see for the city is that that particular area of the roadway system around the center is going to increasingly be congested. Not as bad as it is during construction, but still, I think it's drawing more activity into that area. We're getting that big apartment complex coming on board, and some other businesses on that same site in the near future. Anyway, the bottom line being is it is going to be difficult to kind of sort out what all is happening on this site. This building is set way back, and I notice now with all of the piers and the override for the LRT that I'm kind of, even though I know what I'm going to, and I'm not worried about some new things that I haven't been to before, I can just imagine people coming off the highway suddenly needing this kind of signage. And I think this is a good start, and I agree with Commissioner Farr that we can look forward with the tenant interest in it potentially of bringing this back again, and we can do that.
I also would like
Commissioner
to,
Sanctus.
as a footnote, that from an ecologic standpoint, we are creating in Eden Prairie a relatively dense commercial area with a lot of noise and busyness in terms of not only traffic, but signage, building construction, and now the LRT. And I think it's something that's relatively new to the outer ring suburbs, and I think it's something that the people here have to adapt to.
Any other comments? Julie, there's not another variance request in the next meeting for this building, right?
Here,
You have
no,
to
there
tell
is-
us if
There
we
is
ask.
not.
All
I
right,
would tell you,
okay.
there is not.
All right. Don't think there's any further discussion. Anyone entertain a motion? Someone would like to proffer one?
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the variance request 2021-03 based on information outlined in the staff report dated September 13th, 2021, and the findings and the final order number 2021-03.
All right, a motion from Commissioner Kirk. Do I have a second?
I will second that motion.
Second for Commissioner Sanctus. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Would anyone like to abstain? Thanks for recommending approval. Thank you for choosing Eden Prairie. Moving on, do we have any planners reports?
No, sir.
None. Any members reports? Well, I'd entertain a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
All right, Commissioner Kirk, do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Commissioner Meddy. All those in favor of closing the meeting or hearing or
Aye.
whatever it is?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Andrew.